Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Senators, in which the Sharks lost 5-2 to the Senators. Just throwing that out there. And I came into this game thinking that, if there was a game the Sharks could get 2 points in and try and right the track here, it would be this game against the Ottawa Senators, a team that doesn't really have much hope on the year, a team that doesn't necessarily have much going for them. And so if there were 2 points to claim, it would likely be tonight. But now I'm thinking that other teams in the league are going to be going into games against the Sharks thinking that it's going to be an easy 2 points, which hasn't really been the case in quite a while, I guess maybe 2015. But even then, the Sharks are just looking pretty lost in anything related to even strength, which I will get to a bit later. But I guess to start off, it was Connor Brown who got his first goal of the year to get it started for the Senators. The Sharks tied it up with an Evander Kane as usual power play goal. Then the Senators got a couple more to put it 3-1 in the second period, and then LeBanc made it 3-2 before Tkachuk got a late second period goal to make it 4-2, and eventually a late third period goal from Duclair put it out of reach, and the Senators took it 5-2. So the first thing to talk about would be Aaron Dell, who actually got the start in this game. I was rather surprised about that. In my Canadiens and in my Maple Leafs review, I had been saying that, Dell played a good game against the Canadiens. He might get another game on this road trip if Jones didn't perform well against the Leafs, but Jones did perform well against the Leafs. Jones was their best player for the Sharks against the Maple Leafs, and so I was pretty surprised to see Dell actually get tonight's game against the Senators. He was okay. He made a couple of good saves. I would have liked a better effort on the Tkachuk goal. He didn't have good rebound control in that one, as well as the second Paul goal. The first Paul goal as well as the Brown goal were tough. The Brown one was bouncing puck. It could have gone anywhere really, and the first Paul goal was a really good shot. So it wasn't a great night by Dell. It was pretty average, and I would have liked to see Jones start. Now, Jones did come in for the third period. He led in the goal to Duclair, and I suspect we will see Jones on Tuesday, but I was just all around pretty surprised to see Dell start. I wouldn't put this game onto Aaron Dell, but I would certainly say he didn't help the cause. Next, I will talk about the lineup, as the Sharks did make big changes going in. So first of all, on the first line, Meier was moved down. Now, I came into this season, I guess technically you could consider the Kane, Hurdle, and Meier line the first line, but anyway, I came into this season thinking that the Sharks would have four sort of almost unbreakable duos, and that would be Meier, Couture, that would be Kane, Hurdle, Thornton, Sorensen, and Goodrow and Carlson. I thought those would be sort of the foundations for the first four lines, but because of the scoring troubles that the Sharks have had this season, it seems as though DeBoer has had to break a lot of these up. We've seen Goodrow and Carlson being broken up, but that hasn't been that much of a problem. We've seen Thornton and Sorensen broken up, that hasn't been much of a problem. But now we're seeing Couture and Meier being broken up. So Meier moved down to, or up, or whatever you want to consider it, moved to the line with Kane and Hurdle, and now this is sort of a loading up line. I'm sure DeBoer was hoping that some offense would run through here, because in the previous games the Sharks were running with LeBanc on that line and Meier on the first line, and so with LeBanc and Marleau playing in the top six, those lines certainly weren't bad, but they were slightly hampered in that way. So putting Meier with Kane and Hurdle was likely looking for some offensive output from that line, and while the line was pretty decent tonight, it didn't get anything in terms of goals. The only Sharks even strength goal this game came from Kevin LeBanc, and this was just because the Ottawa Senators had an awful change that allowed Burns to find LeBanc for the breakaway pass. Otherwise, they couldn't get anything done. So Meier moved to this line with Kane and Hurdle, didn't accomplish too much, and I wonder if it actually stays together moving forward. LeBanc was then moved to Couture and Marleau's line. That didn't really get to do much. It continued to be a line that had very little effect, like it was having when it was Meier, Couture, and Marleau. The third line ended up with Gambrell centering it with Thornton on the wing, which was a bit strange. Now, this line, again, didn't really get to do too much in this game. I thought, Sorensen wasn't terrible, but in the end, the third line just not really getting anything done for the Sharks. And then the fourth line ended up being Gregor back in the lineup over Radil, as well as Goodrow and Carlson reunited. The fourth line also not doing much. Seemed to be a theme for the Sharks forwards this game. And so moving on to that discussion of even strength, the Sharks' problems this year have not been special teams. They still have the league's best penalty kill. The power play, while it went 1 for 6 tonight, which isn't great, it did still get a power play goal. That was Evander Kane's power play goal. But all of the Sharks' problems are coming down to their even strength scoring. They're just not getting enough of it. And surprisingly enough, a lot of people thought coming into this season the Sharks' main problem was, of course, going to be their goaltending. Their goaltending was their main problem last season. Why would it not be that again this season? But the goaltending actually hasn't been all that terrible at times. Obviously there have been a couple of games where you're saying that the Sharks goaltending just wasn't good enough, but there were also a lot of games where the Sharks goaltending was perfectly fine. The Maple Leafs game, for example, but the even strength scoring just has been nowhere to be found for the San Jose Sharks, and that stems from the problem that the Sharks have had so many players depart during the offseason. Pavelski, Nyquist, Donskoy, and they were hoping that players from their system would step up and actually fill in those gaps. Now, you can't fill in the gap for a close to 40-goal scorer like Pavelski, but you could at least try and, patch them, I guess, and let a bit of water leak into the boat, but not have the boat sink. But this boat has completely sunk to the bottom of the ocean at this point in terms of even strength scoring, because nobody has managed to come from the Sharks system and actually make an impact forward-wise. No Shemilevsky, no Chekovich, no Blickfield, no anybody on the Sharks top 12. The only new player here is Noah Gregor, who has had very, very little effect, and I guess technically Gambrell, who has been pretty good, I guess, but hasn't done much offensively like some people were expecting from some of the Sharks rookies. And so at the moment, this is a major problem for the Sharks, and I don't know if it's an easy fix. I don't know if this is something that you can sort of just wait out and hope it gets better. Like so many people were saying last season when Jones wasn't performing that well and the Sharks were going into the playoffs, a lot of people did still have hope that Jones would recover because, he has a history of being quite good in the playoffs, and that was something that did occur. Can the Sharks really afford to wait it out and see if the even strength scoring just picks up? I mean, no matter if they can afford it or not, it's sort of what they're going to have to do. They don't actually have the cap flexibility to make any sort of move happen. A lot of their big contracts that they would have to move to try and make some sort of drastic trade are basically impossible to do so, whether or not you're thinking of trading Vlasic, Kane, Couture, Meyer, Hurdle, even those players who you would never expect to trade or never want to trade, you can't even attempt to do so because the contracts are so large. They've got the no movement clauses and everything like that. And so there's very little you can actually do to try and find even strength scoring at this point. And it seems as though you're basically just having to cross your fingers outside of making something like a coaching change, which I know a lot of people want, but I don't know if that is the answer. And so at the moment, the Sharks just sort of seem to be at a standstill. So that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday. They'll take the final game of this 5-game road trip, which has not looked too great at this point, and they'll face off against the Stanley Cup finalist Boston Bruins. So if this game was not easy for the Sharks, well, then the game against the Boston Bruins will be very, very difficult. Now, I guess the good piece of news here is that the Sharks have a history of actually turning around a season completely after losing a game in Ottawa by a disastrous score. So last season they lost 6-2 and then turned it around in the next game against the Canadiens and then went on to have a pretty solid season, making it to the Western Conference Finals. Now they lose 5-2 in a pretty disastrous game to the Ottawa Senators. So maybe, who knows, they defeat the Boston Bruins and then they go on to play very, very well for the rest of the season. It's a bit of a pipe dream, I guess, but you never know. It could technically happen. Maybe, probably not, but I guess we'll see. Class dismissed.